meal, this one would get 5 stars. So good. Starting off with these Black Angus cube steaks. I had 3 packages of those. I'm cooking dinner for some company coming over. So yes, this is what we're starting off with, and we are making Swiss steak. Don't those look good? Nice cut of cube steaks there. So into this shallow dish, I am putting some flour, some Lawry seasoning salt, garlic powder, and black pepper. And that's going to be my dredge for these cube steaks. So I am just going to get them coated in this flour. I don't want a heavy coating necessarily. I just want to get a good coating on here so it will add flavor. It'll give it a nice texture as this fries up in the skillet. And then, of course, it will additionally cause the gravy to be thicker, which is a good thing as well. So I'm going to get these all dredged up, and I'm just going to fry them in my skillet in some olive oil. You can see here I'm kind of pressing down with my fork, and then I'll just give it a little shake to make sure anything that's excess falls off and get these into the skillet. Now, since I have 12 of those that I'm frying up, I'm going to go in batches here. And I also decided to go ahead and put in some onion and let that fry along with this. That'll flavor the onions, it'll flavor the steak. It's going to be delicious. So those are going to fry with these as well. Now I'm going to move mine to the crock pot and let this just go on low and slow all day. You could move these to a baking dish and bake these in the oven if you wanted to. You could also do this whole entire thing just in your skillet. You could do a variety of ways to make the Swiss steak, but I decided to move mine to the crock pot. That way it would just do its own thing. I wouldn't have to tend to it in any way throughout the day, and it'll just get super tender as it cooks, and those flavors will just, the depth of flavor just will increase as it cooks. So you can see here I'm getting a nice crispy coating here on the outside of these, and since these are moving to the crock pot, I don't have to worry about cooking them through. I just kind of want a good crispy coating there on the outside. All right, I am team crockpot liners, so you can see I have that on my crockpot there, and I'm just using a whole can of petite diced tomatoes down into the bottom of my crock pot, and that's going to be kind of the base. And I'm just going to put the first 4 of these cube steaks down inside of the crock pot here on top of these tomatoes. And then since I am going to be layering in more of these steaks, I'm going to use the onions that I'm frying up along with some celery to kind of provide a little bit of a platform in between these next pieces of meat that are getting ready to come on. That way they're not just completely sitting on top of one another. There's a little bit of space in between there as it's cooking throughout the day. So I just used the celery and the onions for that, and I'm just getting these all stacked in. I was pretty proud of this. I had 1 piece of steak left with just enough flour coating in the bottom of this to cover that steak. You just never know if you're going to have too much or too little by the time you get done flouring everything up. So that one worked out perfect. All right, here I'm going to put in the last remaining pieces of steak, and then I'm going to start working on the sauce that's going to go over top of all of this. Okay, you can see all of that yummy goodness in the bottom of that skillet. I'm going in with 1 envelope of brown gravy mix. I'm going in with 1 heaping tablespoon, maybe close to 2 tablespoons of tomato paste, another whole can of the petite diced tomatoes, and then probably about, I'd say, 1 good can full of water there, maybe a little bit more. And and I'm just going to start working those things together. Now with a few shakes of the Worcestershire sauce. You can tell this is going to be flavorful just by looking at the color. All right, now I'm going to get this poured in over the steaks. I normally follow, it's my husband's grandmother's recipe, and I knew right where I could find that in a certain particular cookbook where I have it handwritten, and it was not there. So I don't know where it is, but I just tried to recreate this how I remembered her recipe. I've made this a lot in the past, but it's been a long time since I've made it. This isn't exactly like hers. Hers did not include the brown gravy packet, but this is close. I went in over the top with all of these fresh carrots and the rest of the celery, put my lid on, and then I remembered that I needed to add in the rosemary and the thyme. So back off with the lid. I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of that in just for some extra flavor. Put the lid back on, and this will go low and slow all day. And so I'm going to show you here. I've showed this before, but in case you're new, if you open a can of tomato paste and you don't need the whole thing, just put it in a Ziploc bag, smush it flat, throw it in your freezer. And whenever you need it, you can just break it in a half or in quarters or whatever. And once you do that, it just, you can take out the little piece that you need. So it's a great way to store the tomato paste in your freezer. All right, now I'm going to continue to show you the things that I'm making for this particular night. And so butter and cream cheese and strawberries. I'm going to make some homemade frosting, and I'm going to make a strawberry cake. So I'm going to get these cleaned up, diced up. I've got them in my bowl here. I'm going to add in my butter and my cream cheese. I'm going to get this mixed together, add in some powdered sugar, and make some homemade frosting for this cake. So I have my icing all mixed up here, and the fresh strawberries just provided too much liquid, and the icing recipe that I normally use for just a cream cheese icing, it just was a little too thin. It did not set up as firm as I would have liked to have seen that, but all was not lost. I went ahead and used it anyway, and it was really delicious. It tastes great. It just wasn't thick enough. Now, had I made a 9 by 13, which I normally do, it wouldn't have been a big deal at all. But I made the cake into these 2 rounds, and obviously you just want your icing to be a little thicker. Now, I could have kept adding powdered sugar, and I did put it in the refrigerator to firm up a little bit, but I decided to just go for it just like this. It just had a real homemade look, which is good. The icing was homemade, and the cake was just a strawberry Duncan Hines or a Betty Crocker. I think it was a Duncan Hines strawberry cake mix that I had in my pantry I wanted to use up. So I would have liked it to have set up a little bit more, of course, but that's okay. We just went ahead and used it. I used it anyway, and like I said, it was very delicious, even though it didn't set up. This, on the other hand, cooperated quite nicely, just like it should have. It rose just perfectly. It's always happy thing when your bread rises like it should. And I'm going to get that in the oven so we can have some fresh bread and butter. And then now I've gotten the Swiss steak out of the crock pot. I've got it into a 9 by 13 here just for easier serving and presentation. I put it in this 9 by 13 glass dish. And back here on my stove, I have 5 pounds of Yukon Gold potatoes boiling up and some peas. I always use a hand mixer when I'm making mashed potatoes. And my favorite way to use evaporated milk in place of just regular milk. That's my favorite. Of course, butter and salt. And a big mess. Oopsie. That's why you have an apron on. That's right. Thank goodness for an apron. Just going to keep working on these until I get them just right. All right, and the bread is out of the oven. And I just want to tell you my little secret for bread here. I'm not a bread baker from scratch. This is Kroger brand frozen bread dough loaves. And you just let it rise and bake it in your oven. I have used these for years. Not only do I use them for fresh bread like this, I also use it for stromboli. I use it for pizza dough. I've used it for all sorts of things through the years. So it just turns out great every time. They're about $1 a bread loaf. I think they're sold in a 5-pound bag with 5 of them. I think the price has gone up a little bit, but around $1 a piece. And it just is delicious, fresh bread straight from the oven. And if you don't bake bread, pick some of that up. All right, everyone has arrived. Everything is sitting out here on the island for just a self-serve dinner buffet. We got the Swiss steak. I'm telling you, it was so delicious. It melted in your mouth. Rave reviews by everyone. Just some sweet peas with some butter. Of course, that delicious bread. We had a side salad with all sorts of varieties of toppings, some cottage cheese. Like I said, it was really, really delicious. The Swiss steak was off the charts. And for dessert, of course, our cake. It had been in the refrigerator for a couple of hours, and it was really, really delicious. And the icing doesn't look too bad. It looks more like a glaze in a way. But yeah, I would recommend making this. Maybe just less strawberries or really patting them dry. Maybe, I'm not sure. Nonetheless, it was delicious, and it was a few days before Valentine's, so it seemed quite appropriate to have this yummy strawberry cake. Moving on to another night's dinner, I am sauteing here up in the skillet 1 boneless skinless chicken breast with a little bit of green onion and yellow bell pepper in some olive oil, and I'm going to make some Asian for dinner tonight. So I'm going to get this all sauteed up, and I'm going to move on here to some noodles and some egg rolls. Now for the egg rolls. These were purchased at Aldi in the fresh section. They are not frozen, and they had chicken and pork, so I got the pork. I will do those in my air fryer. And then a while back at Aldi, I picked up these Thai brown rice thin noodles, and I'm going to make those as well. I was really excited to give those a try. All right, so to the chicken, bell pepper, and onion mixture, I'm adding in some broccoli. I steamed that in the microwave. It's one of those steamable bags. And then I'm just going to toss this in with these other veggies and the meat. And I have cooked up my noodles according to the package directions. This is the first time for me to make these noodles, so I wasn't quite sure what to expect. They definitely are starchy. I drain off all the water, and then I'm just kind of using my tongs and putting them in over with this other mixture. I wasn't sure if they were just going to stay gooped up or how it would be, but once I get the sauce on there, they were just fine, and we even had some leftovers, and the next day they reheated just fine. So all in all, I was happy with that. Here is that sauce. If you guys get a chance to pick this up at Costco, pick it up. It is so delicious. We really enjoyed it. I basically used no other seasonings because I knew the sauce would be so flavorful, and it was. Here is my plate. This was really delicious. It was very quick as well. We just topped it with some red pepper flakes and some green onions. It was amazing. I would make this again. Now for this night's dinner, I just had a hankering for macaroni and cheese. And I was looking through cookbooks to find my Swiss steak recipe that I didn't find. And I came across this recipe that I used to make so much when I was younger, lots younger. I got this recipe from a gal that I used to work with, and it was her baked macaroni and cheese recipe. So basically what you do is layer your noodles, your Velveeta, your butter, And once that's all done, you pour in your milk and top it with crushed Ritz crackers and you bake it. Now, seeing as how I hadn't made this in such a long time, I did not remember that I tweaked the recipe just a little bit. And so I remembered when it came out of the oven, I was like, oh, I think I used to add more liquid than what the recipe calls for. So I'm not going to share the exact recipe for that reason, because I think it definitely was one that I had tweaked with. Now, this was her recipe that she used, but it seemed like when I made it, it just felt a little bit dry. And I remembered later, that I added a little bit more liquid than it called for. So I will share this again in the future because this really is a delicious baked macaroni and cheese recipe. The flavor is just really, really good on it. It gets crispy around the edges, and that part is really, really good. But like I said, I will tweak the recipe and try to get a little bit better measurement, and I will share it upcoming. But that's what I made this night, so I wanted to show you. Now, these Eckrich cheddar smoked sausages and the sauerkraut that you're looking at here, this is what I am also making for tonight's dinner. The sauerkraut with the green in it, those are ramps, sauerkraut with ramps. And so that is something James bought at Trader Joe's. Both of these were about half of the jars and needed to be used up. So again, with this sausage, I am frying it up in the skillet here. Some of them I have cut into pieces. The others I have sliced down the middle and kind of filleted open, if you will. That's because I wanted those on a biscuit, like a little sausage biscuit sandwich. So that's why they're sliced up a couple of different ways. So I'm going to remove those, set those to the side, and then I'm going to add in the sauerkraut. Now, I ended up putting a couple more of those pieces back in. I don't know why I made 4 of those. I really only needed to make 2 of them, cut that particular way, if that makes any sense at all. So I removed those. Now I'm going to pour in the sauerkraut. Again, I had about a half a jar of each. My husband likes his sauerkraut pretty sour. I like mine a little not as sour, so sometimes I will rinse the sauerkraut. Today I didn't rinse it, but I did drain off a lot of the liquid, and then I just went back into the jars to get all the rest of it out just by adding in some water and swirling it around. And then I just poured it all in and let this kind of just cook low and let it kind of cook down a little bit and flavor those sausages. And of course the sausages flavor the sauerkraut. This was really, really good. Now I do go in and add in just a little bit of brown sugar. That's the way my mom always made sauerkraut. She added a little bit of brown sugar in. And as you can see, the couple pieces that I put back in there are the longer pieces. But I just didn't put a whole lot, but just a little of the brown sugar. That helps to kind of tame it down just a little bit, provides a little bit of a different flavor. And then I just have a can of these flaky layer biscuits. So that's what I wanted to have with a piece of sausage on it. So good. So I'm getting these ready for the oven. Again, this is just a quick and easy meal using things from my fridge, my freezer, my pantry. This was inspired by I need to use up that sauerkraut. So and we love this meal though. My husband loves sauerkraut and pork, sauerkraut and sausage. He loves it. So I'm just stirring this together here. And again, this just doesn't take very long at all. And it's time for my mac and cheese to come out of the oven. Look how golden and toasty that is. The flavor, I promise you, is so, so good. I will share this recipe soon. I just want to make sure and get it right before I do. And measure out how much liquid it really takes. So you can see here, this is just a little bit dry, but look at that crispy edge. Yum. This was another quick and easy, delicious weeknight meal. We loved it. For the last meal that I'm going to show you this week, this is a big slab of beef ribs. I put these in my crock pot really, really early this morning. They have cooked through, and some of the bones already even fell out in the crock pot. And I just moved them over to this plate to cool so I can start removing all of the excess fat and the bones. These beef ribs are very, very fatty, but they do have a good amount of meat on there as well. So I'm just going to work on this until I get this all taken apart with the fat and the bones. All right, everyone, welcome to my beef rib mess. I am not a beef rib fan, just to be honest, but when you raise a cow and get the cow processed, you you know, you have some cuts in there, and you don't have to have them. You can tell them what you want or whatever, but we get the whole thing. And James actually particularly likes beef ribs, but more like the beef short ribs, like that you get when you're out, honestly, in my opinion. Like when you're out to eat and you get a short ribs meal. Anyhow, I would just probably not have the beef ribs if it were left up to me. But here's what I do, and this is a mess, so there's nothing pretty about this. What I do, actually this was a request from James. I got up yesterday morning and he had the beef ribs sitting in the sink thawing, and he wanted some beef and noodles. So seeing as how we do get these beef ribs, I do work on using them. So sometimes I will cook up a big batch, like stuff my crock pot full or oven full. I've done them both ways, and probably more so in the oven when I'm doing a big bunch because they're big, you know, so you need, you know, you don't fit too many in your crock pot. Anyhow, you just want to cook them and then start getting the meat off. So that's what I've done here. They're a very fatty type of beef, the ribs are, and so it's a good amount of work here to try to get, I mean, it's not anything hard, but you want to get the beef separated from the fat. There's a big fat cap on there, but you can see how tender it is. I'm going to go through with my kitchen scissors and cut these big long strands in half, and I'm making beef and noodles. So oftentimes when I will cook big batch and cook a bunch of these up to get them out of my freezer because they take up a lot of space, I will just get all the meat pulled off and then use it for like barbecue beef sandwiches, and you can see how fatty that is. I've already used a napkin, a paper towel to get this kind of cleaned up once. I'll go back through again because I just don't want all of this fat, greasy, whatever. So anyhow, see there's a piece of fat. I'll just keep continuing to pull off. But sometimes I'll do barbecue beef sandwiches, or we'll do, you know, beef tacos. You can do all kinds of things with it after you cook it and get it all taken care of. So that's what I do when I big batch cook it. And then of course I can freeze anything if I need to. But today I think this looks like, I mean, this is going to be definitely some beef and noodles. But that's okay. This is one more pack of these beef ribs out of the freezer. So I'm going to use my scissors and kind of cut down some of these pieces because I just don't want great big old huge pieces in the noodles. And I'll show you my broth. And that's going to be great to use for the noodles. I actually just bought some new kitchen shears just the other day, but I think they are still in the bag that I bought them in. I didn't even unpack the bag yet, I guess. It had some birthday gifts in there, so I didn't have to get into it right away, but I think my scissors are in the bottom of that. Okay, see, this looks much better. Boy, I'm messy today. Much better. Smaller pieces of beef for the beef and noodles. And a piece of fat. All right, look at that. So much better. What I've been using here for my discard stuff is just a Walmart, double-bagged Walmart bag. So I have the bones and all the yucky stuff in there. And then I'm going to show you. Okay, here's my broth and my crock pot. And there are a couple bones in there from where they kind of fell apart. So I'm just going to scoop all that out. I have this big, wide, slotted, that's perfect for things like this. So another reason James really likes the beef ribs, he likes a bone broth really well. In years past, sometimes he would just go to the butcher and you can buy bones. They don't have them out in the counter or in the case or whatever, but you can buy them. They'll package them up from the back, and then I would make him bone broth, and he just really likes the health benefit of that. So it's another reason he really likes these ribs, because they have those big old hearty bones and you get the bone broth from them. Okay, I am going to turn this off now. This is still pretty early in the day, in the morning, and I'm gonna let this cool. When I come home, I can skim all the fat off the top of this broth, and I can add to it to make my noodles, which I will do on the stove. So I'll just transfer this broth after I get all of the fat skimmed off the top as it cools. And then I'll make the beef broth, the remaining beef broth that I need to cook the noodles. And of course I'll show you that too. Meanwhile, I'm gonna go thrifting, and when I come back, I'll have a big portion of this dinner already done. Now you can see that the fat has gotten solid on the top. I'm just scooping that off, and then I will use this broth to cook the noodles. I'm going to transfer this to my kettle, and I'm just going to follow the package directions for cooking the noodles. And for making the broth, I'm using this Orrington Farms, and so you just use the measurements that it gives you, and you add that to water to make your broth. And then I'm going to get these noodles boiling up.
Shout of praise. Oh, there's only one name. We lift up a shout. We lift up a shout. Oh, together we sing. We lift up a shout. We lift up a shout of praise.
Boy, talk about living on the edge. Look at this. I mean, it is right almost to the top. And look how deep and rich that broth looks. Look at this. Yummy. It's cooking up, looking great. If I need to thicken up the broth a little bit, which I might, just depends. These noodles will have a bit of, you know, flour or whatever that will come off. Maybe thicken it a little, but I will just go in with the cornstarch slurry. Another thing you could do, I never do this, but you could add a scoop of sour cream with this to make it a bit creamier. Kind of reminds me of, you know, that concept, like when you make a stroganoff or something along those lines. A lot of times it'll have sour cream in with it, but I never do that, but you certainly could. So yeah. They only cook, I think, 15 to 18 minutes, so you're getting close. My potatoes are cooking away, my peas are cooking away. Apparently we're on a potatoes and peas kick. So yeah, we're getting close. And here we have it. This is our delicious dinner all plated up. These noodles were probably the best beef and noodles I've ever made. The broth was just so rich and delicious. We absolutely loved this. It was just what James was wanting, and we had plenty to eat on for the weekend, so that was a win also. Hope you guys are doing great. Thank you so much for watching another week of What's for Dinner. Give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. If you haven't subscribed, consider subscribing. I put out a new What's for Dinner video every Sunday. All right, see you next time. Good Lord willing and the creek don't rise.